Welcome to this visual history. This video is a look back at some of the history of Edgeworthstown and surrounding areas. Since images are not always available of historical locations, events and people, I have used artificial intelligence to generate some images. Other images come from the books and art of the Edgeworth family, part of the Mariah Edgeworth Centre's collections, as well as other historical archives. Old videos come courtesy of the Noonan and Walsh families. The earliest references to mass trim date back to the 6th century, when a St. Beathan founded a church in the area. Other sources have dated this saint to the 9th century. This suggests that there was a community in the area all those years ago who helped build a church and attended services. Edgeworthstown, also known historically as Mossdrum, first appeared in maps in the 18th century. Specifically, it was included in a map published in 1778 by George Taylor and Andrew Skinner, entitled Maps of the Roads of Ireland. However, a writer called Dowdall, writing in 1682, described Mahastrim as a very good country town which has a market and 2 fairs and is called Edgeworthstown. The Friary of St. John the Baptist, Ballinasagart, was Longford's only Franciscan house and was to be found in the town land called Abbeylands just outside Edgeworthstown. It was built in the 15th century. In late 1539, the friary was suppressed by Henry VIII's commissioners, buildings were demolished and goods seized. In 1651, the army of Richard Nugent, Earl of Westmeath, plundered parts of Longford, including the Friary of St. John the Baptist. The Franciscan friary at Multifarnham was also attacked, and animals belonging to the monks were seized. In the 1690s, the penal laws came in. One of these was the Banishment Act of 1697, which required all bishops, friars, and those exercising ecclesiastical authority, such as deans, to leave the country by the 1st of May 1698. 2 Franciscans are known to have been parish priests of Mossdrum and are buried locally, Dr. John O'Rourke and Father Thomas McCormack. In the year 1585, 2 brothers named Edward and Francis Edgeworth made their way to Ireland from a place called Edgeworth in Middlesex in the UK. Edward, the older brother, was a respected church leader in the Anglican Church. He had the support of important people like the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Earl of Leicester. Edward started his journey in Ireland at St. Patrick's Cathedral, then became the vicar of Carrickfergus in 1590, and later in 1593 he became the Bishop of Down and Connor. He held this important job until he passed away in 1595. Francis, the younger brother, began his work in Dublin. He was in charge of collecting church fees as the clerk of the first fruits in the Exchequer. In 1606 he got a new job as the clerk of the Crown and Hanaper, working alongside his son-in-law, John King. This job meant he dealt with important documents like writs and patents. King James I was so pleased with Francis's work that he rewarded him with 600 acres of land, which had been taken from the O'Farrell family. Francis was married 3 times. His 3rd wife, Jane Chute, was the daughter of a man named Sir John Chute. Jane was raised as a Catholic but changed her faith to the Church of England when she married Francis. Francis passed away in 1627 and was buried in Christchurch Cathedral. John Edgeworth, also known as Shane Moore, which means Great John, was the son of Francis Edgeworth and Jane Chute. John lived at a place called Cranla or Cranley Castle, just outside of Edgeworthstown. It's not known if the castle was built by Francis or his son, but by the mid-1600s John was living there. He was a tall and impressive man who served as a captain in the army in 1640 and 1641. John loved to throw big parties at his castle, where he had 2 dining tables, one for his friends and another for the local people, who enjoyed plenty of food, ale and tobacco. But his generous lifestyle made it hard for him to keep his money. The Irish Rebellion of 1641 began as an attempted coup by Irish Catholic gentry, who tried to seize control of the English administration in Ireland to force concessions for the Catholics living under English rule. On October 20, 1641, rebels attacked Cranla Castle, looking for valuables and for Captain Edgeworth's family. During the attack, the rebels captured Shane's son John, aged 3, and threatened to kill him. Luckily, a loyal servant named Edmund McBrien Farrell, who was a Catholic, stepped in. He tricked the rebels into thinking he had harmed the child while secretly hiding him in a bog until night fell. Later he smuggled the boy to Dublin, disguised among straw and chickens, and safely delivered him to a family member. Meanwhile, Mary Edgeworth, Shane's wife, faced terrible treatment from the rebels. She was beaten and left outside in the cold, but eventually escaped, possibly with McBrien's help. Disguised as a peasant, she made her way to Dublin and later found safety in England with her family in Derbyshire, where she eventually passed away. The castle at Cranleigh was destroyed, but the family maintained a presence in the area by building a house at Lissard. However, for the most part, there were absentee landlords who struggled with finance down the years, a combination of gambling difficulties and poor management, on one occasion requiring royal assistance to bail them out of financial hardship. By 1700, when Richard Edgeworth was born, the family estate was in debt. Richard, orphaned at a young age, was raised in Pakenham Hall, Tullynally Castle. Raised in a different environment than his predecessors, he became a lawyer and worked on rebuilding the family estate and a new manor house. On March 11, 1731, he married Rachel Jane Lovell in a ceremony presided over by the Reverend Dr. John Madden. Her family was wealthy, and this helped Richard restore the family fortunes. The Midland Great Western Railway of Ireland Act 1845 established the Midland Great Western Railway Company with the goal of building a rail line from Dublin to Mullingar and then to Longford. Construction started in 1846 and reached Mullingar by 1848. Then the railway line was extended to Athlone and then to Galway by 1851. The Mullingar to Longford section was completed by 1855 and Edgeworthstown station was opened on the 8th of November 1855. The station was most likely built on designs by George Wilkinson, who designed many of the stations for the Midland Great Western Company. In 1922 the signal box was destroyed by fire and was rebuilt in 1924. The original layout included double tracks, which were reduced to a single line in 1930. The Longford-Sligo section was completed by 1862. The first train running in that section was on December 3rd, 1862. James Bell, born around 1794, was an architect and served as the county surveyor for County Longford from 1834 until his death in 1872. He was practising in Trim by 1824 and had already designed the Wellington Monument in 1817. In 1828 he travelled to Edgeworthstown to consult on repairs for the library at Edgeworthstown House and was described by author Maria Edgeworth as a down-to-earth, somewhat dishevelled young man. Bell was involved in various building projects, including advising on a house for friends of the Edgeworth family at Black Castle in County Meath. Some sources suggested the market house, now SuperValue, was built to designs by James Bell, as well as the building now known as Curio Corner. In 1834 he was appointed county surveyor, though it was suggested he needed to reside in Longford rather than commute from Trim. He continued in this role until his death at age 78, living in Newtown Forbes at the time. The Edgeworth School, run by Lovell Edgeworth, was established about 1816 and it quickly gained a reputation as a model institution. It became something of a minor showpiece, attracting visits from notable figures such as William Wordsworth and Sir Walter Scott. One of the pupils of the school was Gustavus Vaughan Brooke, later to become one of the most famous actors of Victorian theatre. He went there in 1826. Boarders, he said, lived in a large house adjoining the school and paid a considerable sum for the privilege. Outboarders lived in houses around the town. While there was no official uniform, Lovell Edgeworth did inspect the pupils every day to see they were well presented. The curriculum was innovative for the time, including science, geography and commerce, as well as the traditional reading, writing and arithmetic. There was also a playground, as physical activity was considered important. However, by 1825, Lovell was confessing to his sister that the school had run up considerable debt of £26,000, about £3 million in today's terms. Maria and her brother Sneyd, with the help of other members of the family, as well as local tenants, helped clear the debt and kept the school open until 1834. However, it closed again before reopening again in 1836, before finally closing in 1839. The school was located on the site that now houses the new library in town. This video was donated to the Edgeworth Society by the Noonan family and is a unique look at our town. This was filmed in the 1930s by Bernard Noonan, who was born in Edgeworthstown but emigrated to the USA when he was very young. In his adult years, he became president of the Neldon Corporation and was involved with many construction projects in New York between 1921 and 1931. In fact, Noonan Plaza, which still exists in the Bronx area of the city, is one of the projects that bears his name. When Francis Isidro Edgeworth died in Oxford in 1926, the estate passed into the ownership of Mrs. C.F. Montague, whose mother was an Edgeworth. Management of tenants was handed to the Moore O'Farrell family. In 1935, Richard Moore O'Farrell was shot dead in his home in Lissard. The O'Farrells were agents for the estate, and there was a period of unrest in the area due to the eviction of some local tenants. This ultimately led to the tragic death of Richard, and possibly led to the Montagues deciding to sell the estate and end the Edgeworth association with the town that had lasted 400 years. At the auction that took place, Bernard Noonan purchased the land and house for a reported £3,000, and in 1939 he donated the house with 50 acres of land to the bishop, who passed it on to the Sisters of Mercy. Looking at the house, some of the features have remained almost the same, especially the front of the house. There is a bell tower and an outhouse building that later was the location of a secondary school. No doubt that Maria would have been pleased to see the school on the estate. The general layout of the building is like that shown in old images and paintings. Though the gate lodge can be seen, as well as railings and maybe a gate, we can see sheep being herded into an entrance, possibly the arched entryway that was used as the main gate before Richard Lovell built a new entrance. There are views too of St Mary's Church and around it, and a short glimpse up the main street of the town, and evidence that electricity had come into the town is shown by the poles on the main street. This unique film is an important artefact in the Edgeworth Society collections, and we are very grateful to have it. Sections of this video are taken from a video shot by Thomas Walsh in 1990 and mixed in with more modern video. It shows the changes that have taken place in the intervening years. This first section shows the end of Granard Road, called Manley's Corner by people at the time. It was home to Manley's Bakery, and further up the road was Devine's Tailor Shop. Now the road has been widened and colourful murals decorate the walls. The shop here was Gogan's, then Kane's, and is now fresh today, showing the way things progress and change over time. Scrolling down the main street, we come to a small shop called Brady's. Once a thriving business, it was left idle for a time, but is now home to Fabulous Finds, a charity shop run by local volunteers and community workers. Slightly further on, we can see the Imperial Bar and a car park. These have become the site for the new library. The area was once home to the Edgeworth School established by Lovell Edgeworth, Maria's brother. The library was opened in November 2021. Super Value Supermarket was on the same side of the street, but has now moved across the road to an historic location. Once this site was the site for the local market house, and in later years was home to Cullen's shop. The flat roof of the porch was a popular spot for aspiring politicians to address the locals and sell themselves as candidates. The market house was the brainchild of Maria Edgeworth, who sold some jewellery she inherited and used the money raised to finance the building. When the local branch of the Ulster Bank closed its doors, a group of local people formed a committee and, working with Longford County Council, purchased the building and worked to create the remote working hub called Co-works. Many older people will remember the Auburn Hall, opened in 1947, that had a long association with the McEnroe family. The hall served as a cinema, a theatre, sports centre, courthouse and bingo hall in the years that it existed. It is now home to a number of businesses. One of the more dramatic changes is that of the green, from a rather run-down, neglected-looking place as it looked in 1990. This was a years-long project that added a new building which hosts functions and events run by local groups. It improved and added sporting facilities. Also added was a playground and a walking track with exercise stations. It's very popular with people of all ages who use the facilities. St Elizabeth's Primary School was opened in 1905 and functioned as one of 3 schools in the parish until 2 of them were amalgamated into St Mary's Primary School. St Mary's Childcare Campus was built close by, and behind this building was built the Community Centre, which hosts sports events, shows, meeting and educational activities. Edgeworthstown Town Development, working with local community groups as well as county and government offices, has been the driving force behind many of these projects that have helped enhance the town and local environment.